Today, I'd like to speak on the message Beyond Reason. Yesterday, during youth ministry, I was speaking to young middle schoolers, high schoolers, and we were going over the song As the Deer, just line by line. And there's a part of the song that says, "You alone are my strength, my shield. To you alone may my spirit yield. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship thee." The line says, "You alone are my heart's desire." So I asked the children, can you relate to this? Raise your hand if you can relate to this. You alone are my heart's. First I asked him, who do you think the singer is talking about? He says, thee. Whoever thee is. And of course, naturally, the conclusion is God. Right? The musician is talking about God, but the musician specifically says, you alone are my strength, my shield. To you alone in my spirit, you alone are my heart's desire. So, I asked them, can you relate to this? Some of you are here in the audience. A few of them are outside in youth in the Sunday school. And none of them raised their hand. Actually, it's not so simple. You alone are my heart's desire. So I asked them, what do you desire? People want $1 million. A wonderful, beautiful car. Some of them want to find a good job. Some of them want to do better in school. Desire. So it's hard to kind of push that to the side and just say, you alone are my heart's desire. To a God that you're not sure you fully know, you fully understand, or maybe even fully trust. So then I asked them, how many of you feel like you desire God, even just a little bit in your life? And they all raised their hand. And then I asked the question, why? Why do you desire God? And no one could answer. Just quiet. So in that moment, I thought to myself, these children are 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. The oldest is 21. They couldn't explain why they desired God in their life, but they just knew that they did. And I believe this falls within the realm of something beyond reason. When we read the Bible in Matthew 11 to 15, there you go. This is a chapter that begins with John the Baptist asking his disciples to just ask Jesus, so are you the one who was sent to come? And Jesus in that moment goes on a diatribe, explaining that any man born of woman, there is no one greater than John. But he says, in the kingdom of heaven, everyone there is greater than he. Then Jesus goes on to share about the miracles he did in all the different cities, and said that if the people of Tyre had seen the miracles he had performed in all these other cities, if the people of Sodom and Gomorrah had seen these miracles, they would have repented and turned a new leaf. So Jesus is in that moment speaking to his disciple, a bit grieved that he hasn't been understood. He shares that John the Baptist didn't eat or drink. He was an ascetic. He ate very little. He led a very, we call it ascetic lifestyle, devoid of things of the flesh. Yet people said he has a demon in him. And Jesus said, but I have come and I've drank with the people, I've eaten with the people, and they call me a glutton and a drunkard. Wine bibber. Jesus is emphasizing that you can't please anybody. John the Baptist came. He was criticized, demonized. Jesus comes and he's not worthy. So then Jesus then goes on suddenly into a prayer. And he reads, I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that you have hidden these things from the wise and understanding and revealed them to the little children. Yes, Father, for such was your gracious will. When Jesus was baptized by John, in that moment it says the heaven descended, and God told John, this is my son, in whom I'm well pleased. And John proclaims in support of Jesus in that moment. Yet time goes by, and John starts to question, is this the man? Is this the person? Mother shares, although Jesus appeared on earth as God's only begotten Son, the Messiah, because of human ignorance in an unprepared environment, he faced fierce opposition and rejection. Finally, Jesus went the way of the cross, a course that was not originally intended. As a result, the completion of the providence for which God so yearned and prepared for over 4,000 years of blood, sweat, and tears was prolonged once again. She says, because of human ignorance, something not originally intended happened. No, ignorance. A question as old as time is, does God exist? There are many different schools of thought extrapolating on this idea, trying to prove the existence of God or disprove the existence of God. And this was my situation when I was 16. I became agnostic because I couldn't prove to my atheist friend that God existed. So I thought to myself, do I really know? Do I really know God? Is God real? If I can't explain it to my friend, what do I believe in? So in that moment, and I share the story many times, I was trying to get him to go to church, and I didn't end up going to church because I was talking to him the whole morning. What happened is I ended up in a spiral of researching. But actually, what came before that was a conscious decision that I made. I thought to myself, because I grew up believing in heaven and hell, and that if I believed in God, then I would go to heaven, and I definitely did not want to go to hell. So in my mind, I drew a little Venn diagram, or actually just a little logic chart. It says, if God exists, and I believe in God, I go to heaven. If God exists and I don't believe in God, I go to hell, right? So in this situation, I got to believe in God, right? Or how about if God doesn't exist and I believe in God? Well, the answer to myself was, well, I could live a good life. The world could be a better place. If God doesn't exist and I don't believe in God, well, what does it matter anyway? So in both equations, to me, it's like, okay, there's a logical conclusion that's good in believing in God. So I just decided I'm going to try to believe in God. And actually, it's proven scientifically, right? They call it the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. It's where when you're actively looking for something, you'll find it. If you're not looking for something, you won't find it. It's very hard to notice. It's the reason why you're not noticing that you're breathing right now. The reason why you're not noticing your heart beating is the reason why many of you are not feeling the shirt rubbing on your own skin. It's because you're not actively thinking about it. It's the same in life. If we're looking for something, we will find. That's why we're asked to seek. If we're not looking for something, we won't find it. So that was the start of my little journey, trying to understand God well enough, or at least to be able to disprove the arguments of atheists. And you know where that goes. So reason. What is reason? Reason, to put it shortly and simply, is what we might describe as kind of the set of possible outcomes imaginable. If you've experienced something before, then you have grounds to reason through it. If you ever stuck a fork inside an outlet, you have reason to believe that maybe you shouldn't do that again. You ever done something wrong and you were hurt? You have reason to maybe decide that you shouldn't anymore. It happens all throughout life, every day, especially when you get heartbroken. That's why sometimes people describe love as being unreasonable. You try again, and you still get heartbroken. So why even try? That's something beyond reason. And we'll get into that a little bit more. So reason is kind of like this, right? A set of possible outcomes. You can draw whatever Venn diagrams that you want. However, before I get into this, I read a book. Some of you may know one of our members, Magnus Larsson. He wrote a book called Meaning Beyond Reason. And it's a reflection on Viktor Frankl's book. And he describes two kinds of meaning in life. One is experienced meaning, and one is inherent meaning. And he describes that experienced meaning is tied to our experiences. That is there a positive outcome from this experience? So largely, when we think of it, most people live following what he describes as experienced meaning, and that is generally tied to pleasure and joy in our daily lives. So, do you enjoy drinking Slurpee? Yesterday was 7-Eleven, right? All the kids asked me to take them to 7-Eleven because you get a free Slurpee. Does it give you a kick, when you drink Slurpee? Yeah? Well, it does, and so you drink Slurpee. Do you like watching movies through the night? Yeah, you watch it. Do you feel like you gain some kind of affirmation or recognition if you become wealthy and successful, have a beautiful home, maybe a beautiful family? Yes, and so you do so. Where that fails is when we start to experience unavoidable suffering. Because in that little equation, Magnus describes that unavoidable suffering, to many, there can't be found inherent meaning or joy. But I think the question is, can we find joy even in suffering? What is the purpose of our lives? We suffer every single day, some way, shape, or form, but for some reason in our lives, we're always looking to avoid suffering. It's like whatever is the path of least resistance. I wanted to watch something on the TV in my room, and my eyesight is negative 0.5, so it's not bad. That's why I don't wear glasses on a daily basis, but it helps me to see HD, right? Every time I put on my glasses, the world feels like how God made it, beautiful. So technically, maybe sometimes I've debated, maybe should I get some kind of correction? But the point is, so I want to watch this thing on the TV, and then I decide, my glasses is 2 rooms over. Should I? So then I get up and, I walk, I get it, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, my insurance renews next year, I can get a new frame. Should I get new glasses that I can put right next to my bed so that I can just use that for the bedroom? So the point is, we're all seeking the path of least resistance. That's life. Why take the difficult road if you can take an easy way? It's simple. They say that if you want to drink more water, always have a bottle of water with you, right? But if you don't have a bottle of water with you, it's just hard to go to the kitchen to pour water, to drink it, and wash the cup. We're all seeking the path of least resistance, but is there inherent meaning in suffering? In relationships, we're constantly avoiding struggle. We're avoiding fighting. But I ask myself the question, is that ideal? Many of us will think, okay, well, the best kind of relationship is when everything just goes right. That you get married, you never fight, you never argue, everything is just symbiotically progressing in a manner that nature deems necessary. That maybe we dream of that. And when I first got matched to Hannah, actually during our matching process, I was so angry many different times, but I didn't express it because I thought to myself that, hey, we need peace. And peace is good. But I asked the question, is that really what is best for us? And then while reflecting on praying on this point, it became so clear. Conflict is an inherent part of growth. Pain is an inherent part of growth. A very simple analogy. When you start exercising, what do you feel the next day? Sore. I've been raking the yard like for 3 hours, like 2 mornings ago, and then my back is just hurting. Pain is an inherent part of growth. And so in the beginning, I tried to avoid arguments as much as I could. And then tried to be understanding. I just, before our call or whatever it was, I'd pray and then go on ChatGPT at the time. And I'd say, this is how I'm feeling. This is why I'm feeling this way. What should I do? And always it gave me great perspective. Phenomenal. I advise, in your relationships, if you have problems, please ask ChatGPT. It'll help you. It'll save you a lot of trouble. It'll help you understand it without the emotion that comes with communicating your challenges. It was very helpful, actually, extremely helpful. I actually recommend it. This is not a joke. Actually, Ruchi was telling me he also does that on a daily basis. So, I did that for a while, but then eventually you get married. And eventually you start living together. And eventually someone would come up to you and with a quizzical, maybe frustrated face or emotion or something to say. And in that moment, your immediate thought is not to go to ChatGPT to ask how to answer or how to respond to this person. If anything, it might lead to an inflammation of the situation. So then I learned you have to contend. And there are many times where, Hannah and I are just arguing about this, that. And so I just reflected to myself, wait a minute. Is this okay? Is this ideal? Is this the kingdom of heaven? But actually, what I realized was every time we had an argument, and actually the biggest of arguments, the conclusion of it brought us much closer together. We could understand each other. That we weren't going to let this point, and it's always something silly, nothing big, this little point come between the promise we made to one another. Come between how we choose to relate with one another and to treat God within each other. It's so interesting. Like every single time they argue, and then maybe it gets extended. First of all, I'm a guy who, when it comes to argument, I don't want to talk, right? I just hide away for a little bit. I want my peace of mind, but Hannah can't handle that. Right? So she wants to fix this thing right here, right now. And, okay, I know half of you understand what I'm saying. The other half on the other side, right? And so I'm that kind of person, but what I realized was, and because I thought maybe what is important is that we don't argue, because I don't want to say something I don't mean, right? Because if I'm angry and like, actually, I don't like you. So I don't want to say something I don't mean. And so naturally, I try to be quiet. But then over time, what I came to realize was actually that mattered a whole lot less than her having someone, well, me, to give and take with, to at least have her emotions heard, her feelings heard, and for the restoration of this relationship to happen, start happening. Right? Otherwise, you kind of just lose your mind, whatever, doing whatever. But the point I'm trying to make here is that I found that conflict is important. It's not something to run away from. Any form of suffering can be something that we can learn from, something that we can grow by. There is no growth without any kind of suffering. There's growing pains. When you sit down burning the candle all night studying for your exam, that's not comfortable. But you do it because you want to learn, you want to grow. My dad woke me up at 2 a.m. every morning to study. It wasn't nice. I hated it. Actually, sometimes when he went back to the room, I fell asleep. And then he'll come back 30 minutes later to check on me. But this is something that I feel if we don't experience, it's hard to imagine. We look at the relationship between siblings. And I'm not sure I've ever met any siblings who have never fought with each other before. My brothers and I used to fight all the time. I was the oldest brother, so I had an advantage. Like, really fight. There was one day where my brother got so mad at me. He's just 1 year younger than me. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to show him who's boss. So then he's a Resfred. He comes, I'm standing like next to the door, and then he comes at me, and he just charges his fist. He's charging it. And in my mind, I'm thinking, what should I do? You know what? Maybe I'm just going to take it, and I'm just going to beat him up. So my brother, he charges his fist. And bam! He hits me right in the chest. And it hurt, but I didn't say anything. And then I beat him up. Well, the interesting thing is, every winter, when it starts to get cold, I feel pain in my sternum. And the only thing I can think of that ever hit my sternum was that punch from my brother when I was 9 years old. But I love my brother. Actually, we love each other. We're not fighting. Now that we're older, I don't even understand why we're fighting so much. There is something there, something much deeper than the conflicts that we had. And in many ways, I feel that those conflicts deepen the love we have for each other because it transcends the conflict. That those are not enough for me to treat you one way or the other, to consider you my enemy. And so this is something beyond, I feel, reason. When it comes to the church, when it comes to faith, many times we think of God, and we think that, okay, God is beyond reason. But it wasn't always that way. The ancient world was very religious. Everybody was religious, albeit it was a very transactional kind of religion. Right? People worshiped different gods because different gods provided different things. You worship the sun, and the sun shone. You worship the god of the rain, and the rain poured. You worship the god of the land, and the land bore fruit and trees. You worship Asherah, and you gave birth. Right, Tal? So, Tal's a big critic. That was what the old world was like. Everyone was really religious in some way, shape, or form. Even in the Christian church. Obviously, that's the fundamental tenet of the faith, to have faith. But something happened sometime around the Enlightenment period, or actually a little bit early on. Martin Luther, he writes a thesis, nails it to the wall. People start to think, wait a minute, is there something? Is there something more that we don't know? Is our understanding limited? But the example I want to highlight today is just the story of Galileo Galilei. Many of us know Galileo. Some of us know Galilei. Galileo was a Christian. Actually, back then, it was illegal to not be Christian. So you were a Christian. But there was such a thing as the Inquisition. Right? If you were believed to not be Christian, to not practice the faith, and also to be practicing something else that was considered demonic, then they came after you, they put you in prison, and if you're a witch, you were burned. Or otherwise, right? But this man, he one day just looked, observed the stars, read through Copernicus's book, and he couldn't get his mind around the fact that, wait a minute, the earth can't be the center of the universe. The sun revolves around the earth. Copernicus's book back then was this hidden book. It was legal. You couldn't read it. But he got his hand on it, and so did many others, Nostradamus and the others. So then he decides, you know what, I want to study this for myself. So in 1608, the telescope is invented. In 1609, he modifies the telescope so he can look at the stars, he can look at the night sky. And then he looks around and he's like, whoa, he sees Jupiter. Like, okay. But then he notices something. Wait. There are 3 little lights around Jupiter. And as he's studying this, it's like, wait a minute. Well, there exists other celestial bodies revolving around something else that is not the earth. It's like, okay, that was interesting. And then he looked at the moon and he realized that, wait a minute, the moon is imperfect. So back then they believed that all celestial bodies were perfect because he saw the craters and whatnot. He studied the phases of Venus. And he came to the conclusion, based on studies over a long period of time, that the earth cannot be the center of the universe. That actually everything, these planets are all revolving around the sun. And he goes, he talks to the duke, tries to talk to the princess. He tries to get this out there. He publishes 1, 2, 3 books, many throughout his lives. But what happens is he's persecuted. He's taken to court, and under the potential risk of being executed, he is asked to renounce what he said, whether he truly believes in it or not. And at first he didn't. And then it was stated again, and then he says, actually, yeah, I don't believe in this. This is just my little project research. And then for the rest of his life, he was put on house arrest. He wrote many books, but he was in house arrest. What happened then is it sparked an internal revolution around the Christian world. Not long after, and actually just a bit before, there was already this challenge with how Scripture, or the interpretation of Scripture, limited what we experience in the world. That's what empirical evidence is, right? Something you can observe. And so a wave of Christian philosophers, and then came, scientists, started to feel that this was unjustified. And then a big boom of science came about, and then a rejection of the church, that the church was naive, that the church was limiting the progression of science, and that's when came the dichotomy between religion and science. It was never meant to be something separate. It was always meant to be something merged. And who is the architect of science? When I was younger, I think 9 years old, I heard a pastor preach, one of those really famous evangelical preachers from Nigeria. And then he said something like, scientists don't invent, they discover. That means the thing was there, and it was covered. And then they took the cover off. I remember that line. It was very interesting. But the point is that God is the original scientist of this world. So when I think of Galileo Galilei, I think to the times when our own reason inhibits our growth inhibits us going deeper. Maybe it's that argument you've been avoiding all along. Maybe it's that step you knew you need to take, but you haven't. Maybe it's that trust in God that you know you need. The children that I met yesterday, they said it was hard to desire God alone because they feel it's unpredictable. How am I to know that God will provide for me? How am I to know that things will be okay? But the reality of this world is this world has been shaped by contrarians. That's the very nature of it. Voltaire was also one of the great Enlightenment personality philosophers. He said, what is faith? Is it to believe that which is evident? No, it is evident to my mind that there exists a necessary, eternal, supreme, and intelligent being. This is no matter of faith, but of reason. Faith consists in believing when it is beyond the power of reason to believe. There's an argument. What is the difference between irrational and non-rational? An irrational is something that defies logic. That if you put a metal fork inside a plug, that you might get electrocuted. And you do it anyway, that's irrational. Non-rational is described as something outside the realm of logic. Gut feeling. Your intuition. No one can explain that. But for some reason you know. Just as those children could feel that they desired God, but couldn't put a finger to it. We don't have to live only in the realm of reason. Reason is good. And some of us want predictability in all aspects of our lives. We want to know that when we wake up in the morning, we've got a coffee brewer that works, that's functional. You get your cup of coffee, that gives you energy for your first 3 hours of morning work. That your gym is open, at 12 in the afternoon for your 45-minute workout. We're looking for predictability. But has predictability always served us? One of the most predictable countries in the world, I feel, is Japan. Japan is a country where everyone's on time anywhere you go. I was in Japan, and the train arrives exactly at the time, actually just a little bit before the time, and it departs exactly at the second. I found out that as a rite of passage within many Japanese communities or many places in Japan and families, when you graduate from high school, you're given a watch, maybe a nice one. When you go into work, when you get promoted, that's something that people invest in because they value time. You go around, go to Japan, and look at the wrist of any guy. I tell you, about 90% of them are wearing some kind of wristwatch. It's very different from America. But there's always something beyond. And in the case of Japan, this massive predictability isn't paying dividends in the way that we might hope. And one of the big crises in Japan today is what? The birth crisis. Japan has reached a point in history where they can't make up for the birth deficit they're in. I believe it's 0.7 something. Basically, there's no replacement of the working class right now. So in the next 50 years or so, it's going to be very difficult, and there has to be external infusion of people to be able to make that economy survive, right? But I'd like to tell you a little story about Jerry the botanist. Jerry is a botanist. Botanist is someone who kind of looks into researches flowers, takes care of the flowers. He's in his research lab, and he leaves for the weekend, and he leaves the flower on the table. And then Alexa, who is coming in for the night, sees the flower, and she is so enthralled. She's studying it. She's doing research over this specimen. And then she spends the whole night just researching its origin, its family, just where it's from, its implications, and all that. And the next morning, Jerry comes to work, and then Alexa says, Jerry, that specimen you left on my table, I looked into it. It's amazing. She just quotes every single thing she had researched, where it's from, what it could do, what the implications are within their line of work. And she's so excited, but then Jerry said, Alexa, the flower I left was a rose. And yesterday was February 14th. Alexa, in her world of science, her world of research, had missed the point of that flower. It was Valentine's Day. But she was focusing on that point, that singular point of study, which she felt Jerry gave her the flower for. Some things are beyond the realm of reason. And I'd like to conclude with this point, which is from John. This is when Nicodemus comes to Jesus, and then there's a talk about being born again. And Jesus kind of concludes with, the wind blows where it wishes, and you hear its sound, but you do not know where it comes from or where it goes. So it is with everyone who is born of the Spirit. We talked earlier about predictability, but I wonder, how often in our lives do we make room for God to work? How often in our lives do we reflect on this point to allow what is outside our realm of possible outcomes to occur? And many of us in our lives have experienced that, where something you couldn't predict led to something amazing, led to something wonderful within your life that you couldn't figure out until much later. That's the reality of life. I was talking to Jeffrey. I don't know, could I use you as an example? And then I asked Jeffrey, kind of, where are you at right now? What is one challenge you have in your right now? And he says, Shine City recently hasn't had a lot of people. Sometimes it's just 2 people, maybe 3. And it's just something he's been a bit challenged with. Many of you know Shine City, our volunteer project, every single Saturday. Let's give him a hand. For 13 years, he's not stopped, and he continues. Thank you, Jeffrey. But for some reason, he keeps going. Every single Saturday he's here, he just goes out there and does community service. He goes out and I ask Jeffrey, why do you do Shine City? He said 2 things. Forget the first one. But the essence of it was, he wants to create an environment, a different kind of environment where members can come and fellowship with each other. That's what he said. I thought the answer was going to be, we're going to serve the city and transform the city into a shining city. That's what I was thinking right away. But he was thinking of the people. And how can I create an environment where people can come while serving, be able to develop a deeper relationship with each other? And that's the reason he's been doing all this time. And ever since it started, maybe fewer and fewer and fewer people are coming, but he continues. He's doing it. He's going, and I don't understand, but he's going. Someone may look at this and think, maybe he's a little crazy. But maybe that's what it takes. I was talking to Mr. Sato. When he was fundraising a long time ago, there was a time where he was at gunpoint of the cops. Arrested for fundraising. And many of you have that story too, or a similar kind of story. But that didn't stop him. That didn't stop him. He kept going. He kept going. For something he believed in. For something he held dear. Left his life in Japan, a very promising job, to be able to serve God by living day to day in a van, fundraising. That makes no sense in this world. Someone's going to look at you and call you crazy. But the reality is this world was shaped by crazy people. Now, my mom was matched to a man she didn't know. She had never met before. On the day of the blessing, the day of her marriage, they weren't even together, right? She never met this person, and one day she decides she's going to buy a plane ticket to go to Africa, Ghana, and meet a man she had never met before, right? And then she shows up in Ghana expecting some African man to be there. The only thing to go off of is that father and mother said this man is a man of God who also chose this path to be able to come and to be with someone you didn't know, to heal the divide in this world, to be able to love someone unlike us, to be able to love and bridge the divide and differences that we share in this one. That was all she went off of. Didn't know this person, didn't even speak English, or knew if he spoke English. Many people ask me, I say I'm from Ghana, many people ask me, do you speak English in Ghana, right? We speak English, but she didn't know. And she barely speaks English even today. But she goes there to find, I don't even know how it happened. You know, you go to the airport, he's like, where's my husband? And somehow she saw him, and they just, okay, you're the one. And he's a missionary too. They didn't know where they were going to stay, what they were going to do, what comes next. But somehow she believed. And it's because of that faith. It's because what she believed in God, her faith in God transcended what this world chooses to call reasonable. And that's the story of many of us here today. You've been unreasonable in some way, shape, or form, and the world has called you to it. The world has accused you. Maybe you've been pushed away by your own family, by your own friends. And it seems a little crazy. But change does not happen within the realm of reason. God is beyond reason. And that's the reason, because my mom decided to trust a stranger she had never met, go into a country she had never been in, a language she didn't speak. That's why I'm here today. Right? And I feel that's a testament. That's a testament to transcending something beyond ourselves. When the world looked at Jesus, they saw a man who claimed to be something that they didn't believe he was. They saw a man who spoke of the law of Moses, but said otherwise. They saw a man who was unlike any other, and they accused him of being of the devil. And when they got him, when he was beaten, and when he was crucified, they saw their own victory, that he had quenched this flame that could have destroyed what they were building. This man who could have started a revolution against the Romans. They saw victory. Right there as Jesus laid on the cross. But God had a different plan. God saw that moment. And to God, Jesus forgiving them for what they did was the victory. God saw this crucifixion and used it as the greatest gift that humanity could have ever received. God transformed something that we couldn't understand to something much greater. God is the ultimate author of reason. Our life is so limited. We live maybe 100 years on this earth. What can you learn in 100 years? You can't learn the collective intelligence of 6,000, 200,000 years of humanity within 100 years. But God is the Alpha, and God is the Omega. Our Heavenly Parent has been there from the beginning and will be there till the end and knows all. So in our lives, let's choose to believe. Let's choose faith. And even in these times in our movement, it's trying times. Mother is in a detention center. We don't know what's going to happen. We're uncertain. But can we choose to believe that God is working right now? that this could bring about a greater victory never before seen? That Mother is in the position carrying the cross for each and every one of us so that God's providence can advance forward. Can we see that? God doesn't work within our understanding. God is beyond that. God is everything. Every time I meet and I talk to any one of our members, there's so much profound insight and depth to the story. You can see how God is working through each person. And so how much more if all of our life experiences, all of our brains, everything just came together here, we have something much greater than the individual part. That's why God said, when two or more are gathered, there I am in their presence. Because two is greater than one. How much more 200? How much more 8 billion people? How much more all people who've ever existed in this world? So let's come together as children of God who have faith in God, who choose to defy just what the world says is unreasonable in our faith. Hold on to your faith. God knows you and your sincerity in your heart. We have to step beyond what we think and what we know into the realm that is unpredictable. Some people describe it as an abyss that you're stepping into without knowing where your next step is going to be. But that is the road less traveled. That is the straight and narrow road. And will we choose to walk that path of faith, of belief, of offering up to God? And I'm not saying that go and don't study for your exam that's happening tomorrow. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying just go pray for 15 hours and not study and hope you're going to pass the exam. But I'm saying invite God into that process. And trust that even if you don't get a perfect score in that exam, that God is still working because you invited God into that. Trust that even if your relationship didn't work out and you pray that it will work out, that God is still working in that process. Trust that even if your finances didn't work as planned, that God is working in that process. God is molding you to be what you could be for the future. We think so much centered on the present today, but God is working. So let us give space in our hearts. We're so clear in what we want and we pray about that. But what if that's not God's plan? What if that's not what's good for you? My biggest revelation from God was that God knows what I want and God knows what I need. And God loves me. If someone loves me and knows what I want and what I need, that's all I need. Because sometimes what I want is not what I need. When Lot went to Sodom, he thought he wanted the luscious greens around the Jordan River. But what happened? That's not what he needed. That's not what his wife needed. God knows what you want. God knows what you need. So let's keep God in our hearts. Somewhere in there, there is a hole. People call it a God-sized hole that only God can fill. Let's leave that open and let the Spirit work. The wind blows where it wishes, and you hear its sound, but you do not know where it comes from or where it goes. So it is with everyone. So it is with everyone who is born with the Spirit. So let's move with the Spirit. Allow God to work in our lives. And it may be beyond reason, but let's have faith that God is still working. And even if it doesn't materialize in your lifetime, even if you don't reach the level of power or wealth or happiness within your lifetime, trust that God is still working. Because the world doesn't end when your physical life ends here. Generations, we are reaping the benefits of a decision made by people 4,000 years ago. We are reaping the benefits of them. Because of them, we can live today, we can be alive, we can trust, we can be happy. No such thing as human rights in the Roman Empire, but look at us today. We live in a free world. Someone paid the price for the greatness that we experience today. So let's believe and let's act in faith. Let us think beyond reason. I put this picture up there just as an example. It made no sense for a man who was sentenced to death by the other man. to go and to love, embrace him, and support him. Make no sense. No sense at all. He was beaten and had the execution date ready. That's Reverend Sun Myung Moon to the left, and Kim Il-sung, the North Korean president, first one to the right. But he chose to go beyond reason, to love his enemies. And maybe we can reflect on that point together. Where can we grow? And how can we leave room in our hearts for God to work? Thank you very much.